Today is the first day in our series on relationship vampires. You know the people. They're the ones that, whether you love them or don't love them, you have to be around them. And when you are, they suck the life right out of you. And so I have a question right at the beginning as we look at the first type, maybe species you want to call it, of this relational vampire. Do you know anyone who is a control freak? When I was growing up, I had a youth leader. Her name was Charlene, and we would go to her house, and she had a spoon collection, the little, tiny mini spoons, and she had them set up on her wall, and they had a specific order. They were oriented a certain way, and there were probably at least 100 or more hanging in this display. And so every time we would come, we would just move one or two or a couple, because we knew that it would mess with her. Because these spoons were very specific in how they were laid out and very particular about how they were supposed to be. And we would go and mess with it just because we knew it would mess with her. And it's funny when it's someone messing with spoons, but it's not as funny when there's somebody trying to control you in that same way. And it doesn't really matter what type of control they're exerting on you, right? Because sometimes it's just malicious. There's some people that look at you as someone to use, someone to make themselves feel better about themselves, someone that they can control and take what they want from. Maybe you've had somebody in your life, a spouse, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, where you weren't there so they could give something to you, but just so that you could be taken from. Or an authority figure that was abusive towards you in some way. There's also people that they're needy. And so their control comes because they think you have what they need, and so they want to control you so they're able to get it. The problem is, even when you give them what you have, there's still never enough to fill the hole that they've got inside of them about whatever it is they're trying to get from you. Whether it's attention or respect or value or identity, because you were never made to fill the hole, so it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger as you take and take and take. And then there's some people that are controlled by people that really care about them, that really love them. And so they kind of feel like, in a little ways, they're like Jesus. Like Jesus, we say all the time, loves you and has a plan for your life. And so do they. They love you and they have a plan for your life because they know what's best. And maybe you've had some parents that are like this in your life, where before you were in elementary school, they had picked out your spouse and your career and where you were going to live and how they were going to retire with you and all of that. And what happens when the control freak doesn't get the control that they want? Well, usually it just gets uglier instead of getting better at first, right? They whine, they pout, they stomp their feet. Maybe you are suddenly subject to the silent treatment and that vacuum becomes super awkward and uncomfortable. It's a place where when you show up around them, you're not able to be yourself. Because you're like walking through a minefield and you don't want to misstep and blow everything up, right? And the crazy thing is, as we've been talking about these types of people, these controlling, manipulating people, you have somebody in mind. And chances are, because we're human beings, somebody else has you in mind too. Because it's really hard for us to go through life without being controlled or without being controlling. And so we should know, what weapons do controlling people use? Because we've probably used them too. And two big ones are threats and guilt. Now, threats at a basic level look like this: comply to what I want, or you'll regret it. It's a manipulation tactic, right? So people are pressuring you to get more physical in the relationship when you're dating than you want to, and if you don't do what they ask, then they're going to leave, and then they're going to spread rumors about you at school, that they're going to post stuff on social media, and you will regret it. Or the boss that you're terrified is going to fire you. I had this one time just in a church situation too. A couple came in, they were a little bit wealthier than a lot of other people in the church, and they started to try and make demands on things. And they came to the point where they came up to me one time as I wasn't giving in to what they wanted, that they point blank told me, We are the ones that have the money, so you need to do what we say, or we're going to take ourselves and our cash and we will leave, and quote, you will not survive the next 5 weeks. Eesh. Beyond threats are guilt. Guilt at the basic level, it attacks who you want to be or who you think you are or who you think you should be. It's an identity thing. So someone will come up and say, I thought we were friends. And you won't do this for me? After all I've done for you, you are this ungrateful? Or the grandparent that once you finally give them a call says, you never call, I'm going to die here by myself, and you have to remind them quietly that phones work 2 ways, right? Or one of my favorites, you call yourself a Christian and you treat people like that? It plays into who we think we are or who we think we should be. And so how do Christ followers love intentionally and unintentionally manipulative people? Because that's the command, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbors as yourself. And neighbor is not a geographic term. It's a theological one. Anyone in your proximity is your neighbor. So how do I love the people in my proximity that are trying to control me? Whether they're doing it with good motives or bad motives, it doesn't matter. So we need an example, and thankfully Jesus dealt with this on a regular basis. Matthew 16 gives one example of where this takes place. So Jesus in this chapter is really trying hard to get his disciples to understand the situation. They want them to know, he wants them to know who he is and why he came to earth in the first place. And so he ends up having a conversation with them, asking, like, who do people say I am? Trying to nail down his identity. And finally, he asks them, who do you say that I am? Who do you, these people that have lived with me for 3 years, who have witnessed my miracles and my signs, who have seen the teachings, have heard the extra lessons around the campfire, have watched my way of life, who do you say that I am? And Simon, who we know a lot better as Peter, nails the question. He says in front of everyone in that group, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. In fact, it is that proclamation and kind of the gold star on that is Peter getting the name Peter. As Jesus says, you've got that right. And it wasn't just you who gave you the answer. God spoke that to you. And so Jesus follows up that gold star moment with talking about the coming church having authority. That this declaration that he is the Messiah, the Son of the living God, is the rock that the church will be built on. And that church will be able to have some power to bind up things on earth, and that means they're going to be bound in heaven, and to loose things on earth, and that means they're going to be loosed in heaven. And then Peter and the rest of the disciples come to the next lesson. As Jesus got them to have an idea about who he was, and now he needs them to know why he came. And so it says in verse 21, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and then he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said, this shall not happen to you. Now Peter here is not being malicious. He's not trying to be out of line. He cares about Jesus. He's scared about what might happen to him if all this stuff takes place. And so he acts like that binding power and loosing power that Jesus just talked about is all on him with no Holy Spirit needed. And so he says, you know what? Manipulation tactic number one, we're going to isolate Jesus away from everybody else because then we can control the variables in the situation a lot more. And then Jesus, I know you've said all those things, but nope, it is not going to happen. I'm going to bind that up right now so we don't have to deal with that. It's almost like Peter Quill talking to Iron Man in the Avengers movies where they're getting ready to fight the big bad guy. Iron Man says the plan, and Quill comes up and says, well, you know what? I like your plan, but it stinks. So why don't you let me come up with a plan, and then it'll be really good. He had nailed the last quiz, but Peter is crashing and burning on this one because he's trying to exert control over someone else when he does not have the control. And so Jesus turns and says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Some strong words. "You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." And then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what he has done." So how does Jesus respond to this controlling, manipulative move from Peter that can help us? Well, the first thing is, to love controlling people, you have to know your calling. You've got to know who you really are. Jesus kept saying this over and over and over again in the scriptures. Jesus kept saying, "I have come to seek and to save that which was lost. I've not come for the healthy, but for the sick. Not to serve, but to serve, and to give my life as a ransom for many." He was very clear on the purpose. And if you're not clear on the purpose, then it is easy for somebody else to come in, and they get to decide what your purpose is. They get to say, "Hey, why don't you do these things instead?" And they could have picked lots of things. He could have continued to just heal everyone, because there were still sick people in Israel. He could have fed everybody. There were still hungry people. The next day after you eat, you want to eat again. You could continue to teach. And there were people who wanted him to focus on all of those things. Like, "Hey, why haven't you gone out to this village? Why haven't you gone to these people? Why haven't you shared this truth yet?" He had all of these things he could have done that would have filled his time and been good things, but they weren't why he came. He had a calling that was different than that. You see, calling, sometimes we get mixed up on because we think it's this mysterious thing that we've got to work really, really hard to find. And Craig Rochelle has helped me kind of understand calling over the years. There are parts of it that sometimes God will show up and give you a very clear sense of something big that he wants from you. Like coaching the U.S. men's national soccer team, or ending cancer, or something like that. But other times, he just wants you to start by answering the call to be faithful in the things that he's already given you. So in his words, calling might be to love your wife. Your calling might be to lead your children. Your calling might be to study well. Your calling might be to be a witness. What makes this hard? Most of the time, we get off of our calling because we want people to like us. Anyone else have that problem besides me? Like, I really want people to like who I am. I want to be kind and affable and have people want to be around me and all that stuff. And so what happens is sometimes you end up, if you're like me, doing things for people that you didn't really want to do, or doing things for people that you maybe should not have done because it took you away from what you were supposed to be doing, but at least then they'd have a better opinion of you or like you better, right? And so you end up putting other people's opinions and desires ahead of God's. And there's a term for that. Whatever you put ahead of God is an idol. And so I learned that I couldn't do this a long time ago in ministry. One time I met with our board and I had them fill out this questionnaire for me. And basically it was a chance for them to fill out my schedule. And I said, okay, what should I be doing with the time that I have that you would be pleased with? And I took everybody's list, there were about 7 people at the time, and I added up all of the tasks and how much time they wanted me to spend on everything, and I figured this out real quick. If I wanted to make everybody happy and do everything they had on that list, it was going to take me 200 hours per week before sleep, eating, or time with family in order to make everybody happy. In other words, I was already 32 hours behind my next week just to make the first week work. That's why you need clarity on what you're supposed to be doing. Because like Jesus said, if you are always waiting for somebody else to tell you what to do and control you that way, and you end up doing those things, then you are distracted from the things that God might actually be calling you to. We need to know what our calling is, what our purpose is, if we're going to deal with people who want to control us. The second thing Jesus teaches us here is that to love controlling people, you have to acknowledge their attempt to control. Now, sometimes this is going to be verbal, and sometimes this is just going to be in your head, but you have to say to yourself, and sometimes to them, this is what's happening here. You see, Peter is trying to have Jesus' future fit the preferred future that Peter has in his mind. That's the same thing that Lucifer did. It's the same thing that Adam and Eve did. They are trying to take God's place. They're like, no, I know better than you, God. Which is where control becomes that same thing that goes above God, becomes an idol. And so for some of us, our lives are based around worshiping control, seeking after it with the way we live our lives, desiring it more than anything else, because control gives us a sense of peace, of security. It makes us feel like we're grasping onto something that's solid, and the more we try to hold on to something and control it, the more we get lost in the cycle of, if I have to control it, then I have to get more of it. And once I get more of it, then I have to hold on tighter because I don't want to lose what I've got. And it goes out of control. And we become obsessed with that when we could be obsessed with God and the things of God. And that is why Jesus replied, "Get behind me, Satan." He is calling out even Peter's good intentions, because his good intentions are getting in the way of his purpose. He's being distracted from the things of God. He's being told to meet needs he's not supposed to meet. He's isolated away from God and from others. And you have to ask yourself a couple questions when somebody's coming up and you realize that the control feeling is coming in. You have to ask yourself, is their desire really for me, or is it more for them? Like are they kind of using me in this situation? The other thing you have to ask yourself is my identity wrapped up in them and how they feel about me, or about how Christ feels about me? Who gets to call the shots in your life? And as you go through this process and start to call out the control that's happening, it may be fun to think about calling your mother-in-law Satan, but I don't recommend doing it, because the goal is not just to call things out. The goal is to improve the relationships that you have, to love your neighbors well. And guess what? Your mother-in-law is your neighbor. And besides, a lot of us are just as controlling in this way. You've tried to guilt your spouse into changing, and it hasn't worked. The clothes still end up 3 feet from the hamper instead of in the hamper. The dishes still get stacked up in the dishwasher the way you don't want them. Whatever it is, you have tried the guilt, and it hasn't worked. The person you love, you've tried to manipulate them all over the place to get them sober, and manipulation isn't working. It's because you do not have the power and the authority to change their hearts. Your helicopter parenting might make your kids look safe, but it won't save them forever. You can't keep them unexposed forever. Only God can truly keep them safe. And that is the issue here. All of our efforts to control other people, especially our good intentioned ones, fail because we are trying to take the place of God when we are trying to control other people. Other people are trying to take the place of God when they're trying to control us. And we have to get out of that. to make this work. And so the remedy for controlling others and for them controlling us is surrender. To be in the center of God's will, to be His disciple, we have to deny ourselves and take up our cross and follow not our sense of control or what we think the future should be, not what everyone else is telling us we're supposed to do. We are to follow Him. In relationships with each other, that means that we have to change what we expect and what we accept if we want things to improve. You do realize that all the relationships you have are made up of the things that you expect and the things that you accept in that relationship. And so surrendering to God's will for yourself will mean that in those places, there's going to have to be some changes. That you're going to have to expect different things of yourself and of the other person. You're going to have to set some boundaries that might not have been there before. And you're going to have to lovingly declare them clearly. Because if you want someone to come and live in your life, they're free to do so as long as they stay within these boundaries that God has set for healthy living. And if they step out of those things, then you have to not accept it. You have to know who you are, and you have to name what they're doing, and you have to surrender to God. I love you, but you cannot keep calling me that. I love you, and you can scream, but I'm not going to tolerate that behavior from you anymore if you're going to live in this house. I love you, but I can't bail you out again. I can't keep giving you things that aren't really helping you just because you want it. And we'll find that as we start to deal with the controlling people in our life, it's not going to be all wonderful at first. No, I wish I could give you big hope that the first time you do this, you're going to love it and everything's going to be great, but that's not how it works, because carrying your cross is not easy. Denying yourself is hard work, and having people fight back against it while you're doing it makes it even harder. Change is hard, but here's the truth. You can hurt in your dysfunction. That is hard choice number one. Or you can hurt as you're healing. That is hard choice number two. Which one do you want to have? They end up in very different places. Following Jesus declares, I am not the one in control, and neither are the other people around me. He is. And I have entrusted myself and I have entrusted them to Him. And I will go where He leads me. For the Son of Man is going to come in His Father's glory with His angels, and He will reward each person according to what they have done. And what is He asking us to do? To love people by denying ourselves, taking up our cross, and following Him. Because whoever wants to save their life, control everything, will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. Lord, I pray that as we deal with dysfunctional, controlling people in our lives, and a lot of times that's ourselves, Lord, would you help forgive us of the idolatry that we've fallen into, where we've put control or manipulation or security or whatever it is ahead of you. Instead, help us to surrender, to take up our cross, and to follow you, to let you help us know who we are and what we're supposed to be doing, because if we know whose we are, we'll know who we are. And if we know who we are, we will know what to do. Help us to have wisdom to know when someone is trying to control us, to know if their desire is for themselves or for us, if our identity is wrapped up in them or in you. Help us to keep surrendering to you in such a way that instead of trying to control everything around us, including other people, we entrust ourselves to you, the one who is making all things new in all things good, in ways that we could never ask or imagine or understand on our own. Help us to break free and to heal from the places where we've let control cause dysfunction in relationships that you have gifted us with. That we might see your life and your peace even in our neighbors. We ask these things in your name.